Hello. If you're feeling anxious, restless, or heavy hearted and looking for a peaceful, quiet corner of the internet, I'm here for you. Welcome to my channel, Come Sit With Me. My name is Danal, and I'm going to read to you while you hold yourself a little tighter. Rest and breathe. Hey, if you can, please send me an emoji in the chat box or the comment section so that I know you're here. Also, if you're up for it, I'd like to know what comforting beverage it is that you're having. Only if you want. I'm really liking rooibos at the moment. I'm having the kids flavored honey bush one. I know there's an adult one that you get, but I don't like the taste. It tastes acrid to me. I don't know. The kids one is really delicately balanced and beautiful. It has this honey flavor, flowery flavor that I really like. Only if you're up for it. Otherwise, I'm going to start. Um, We're reading The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. We're in chapter 6. I believe I have taken a wrong turn again, she said, standing still at what seemed the end of a short passage of tapestry on the wall. I don't know which way to go. How still everything is. It was while she was standing here, and just after she had said this, that the stillness was broken by a sound. It was another cry, but not quite like the other one she had heard last night. It was only a short one, a fretful, childish whine muffled by passing through the walls. "It's nearer than it was," said Mary, her heart beating faster. "And it is crying." She put her hand accidentally upon the tapestry near her and then sprang back, feeling quite startled. The tapestry was the covering of a door, which fell open and showed her that there was another part of the corridor behind it, and Mrs. Medlock was coming up it with a bunch of keys in her hand, and was very cross and a very cross look on her face. "What are you doing here?" she said, and she took Mary by the arm and pulled her away. "What did I tell you?" "I turned round the wrong corner," explained Mary. "I didn't know which way to go, and I heard someone crying." She quite hated Mrs. Medlock at the moment, but she hated her more the next. "You didn't hear anything of the sort," said the housekeeper. "You come along back to your own nursery, or I'll box your ears." And she took her by the arm and half pushed, half pulled her up one passage and down another until she pushed her in the door of her own room. "Now," she said, "you stay here. You stay where you're told to stay, or you'll find yourself locked up. The master had better get you a governess, same as he said he would. You're one that needs someone to look sharp after you. I've got enough to do." She went out of the room and slammed the door after her, and Mary went and sat on the hearth rug, pale with rage. She did not cry, but ground her teeth. There was someone crying. There was, she said to herself. She had heard it twice now, and some time she would find out. She had found out a great deal this morning. She felt as if she had a long journey, and at any rate she had had something to amuse her all the time. She had played with the ivory elephant and had seen the grey mouse and its babies and their nest in the velvet cushion. Chapter 7. The Key to the Garden. 2 days after this, when Mary opened her eyes, she sat upright in bed immediately and called to Martha, "Look at the moor! Look at the moor!" The rainstorm had ended, and grey mist and clouds had swept away in the night by the wind. The wind itself had ceased, and a brilliant, deep blue sky arched high over the moorland. Never, never had Mary dreamed of a sky so blue. In India, skies were hot and blazing. This was a deep, cool blue, which almost seemed to sparkle like the waters of some lovely bottomless lake. And here and there, and high, high in the arch blueness, floated small clouds of snow-white fleece. The far-reaching world of the moor itself looked softly blue instead of gloomy purple-black or awful dreary grey. "Aye," said Martha with a cheerful grin, "the storm's over for a bit. It does look like this at this time of the year. It goes off in a night like this, like it was pretending it had never been here and never meant to come again. That's because the springtime's on its way. It's a long way off yet, but it's comin'." "I thought perhaps it always rained or looked dark in England," Mary said. "Aye, no," said Martha, sitting up on her heels among her black lead brushes. "Nowt o' the sort." "What does that mean?" asked Mary seriously. In India the natives spoke different dialects which only a few people understood, so she was not surprised when Martha used words she didn't know. Martha laughed, and as she had done the first morning. "There now," she said, "I've talked broad Yorkshire again, like Mrs. Medlock said I mustn't. Nowt o' the sort means nothing of the sort," slowly and carefully. "But it takes so long to say it. Yorkshire, the sunniest place on earth when it's sunny. I told thee that the more after a bit, just as you wait till you see the gold-coloured gorse blossoms, and the blossoms, oh, the broom, and the heather flowering, all purple bells, and hundreds of butterflies fluttering, and bees humming, and skylarks soaring up and singing. You want to get out on as sunrise and alive, out on it all day like Dickon does. Could I ever get there?" asked Mary wistfully, looking through her window at far-off blue. And it was so new and big and wonderful and such a heavenly colour. "I don't know," answered Martha. "Tha's never used thy legs since thou was born, it seems to be. Thou couldn't walk 5 mile. It's 5 mile to our cottage." "I should like to see your cottage." Martha stared at her a moment curiously before she took up her polishing brush and began to rub the grate again. She was thinking that the small plain face did not look quite as sour at this moment as it had done the first morning she saw it. It looked just a trifle like little Susan Ann's when she wanted something very much. "I'll ask my mother about it," she said. "She's one of them that nearly always sees a way to do things. It's my day out today and I'm going home, eh? I'm glad Mrs. Medlock thinks a lot of mother. Perhaps she could come talk to her." "I like your mother," said Mary. "I should think thou did," agreed Martha, polishing away. "I've never seen her," said Mary. "No, thou hasn't," replied Martha. She sat up on her heels again and rubbed the end of her nose with the back of her hand as if puzzled for a moment, but she ended quite positively. Well, she's thus sensible and hard working and good natured and clean that no one could help liking her, whether they'd seen her or not. When I'm going home to her on my day out, I just jump for joy when I'm crossing the moor. I like Dickon, added Mary, and I've never seen him. Well, said Martha stoutly, I've told thee that the very birds likes him, and the rabbits, and the wild sheep and ponies, and the foxes themselves. I wonder, staring at her reflectively, what Dickon would think of thee. I wouldn't. He wouldn't like me, said Mary in her stiff, cold little way. No one does. Martha looked reflective again. How dost thou like thyself? Said she inquired, really quite as if she were curious to know. Mary hesitated a moment and thought it over. Not at all, really, she answered, but I never thought of that before. Martha grinned a little as if at home at some homely recollection. Mother said that to me once, she said. She was at her wash-tub and I was in a bad temper and talking ill of folk, and she turns around on me and says, "Thou young vixen thou, there thou stands, saying thou doesn't like this one and thou doesn't like that one. How does thou like thyself?" It made me laugh, and It brought me to my senses in a minute. She went away in high spirits as soon as she had given Mary her breakfast. She was going to walk 5 miles across the moor to the cottage, and she was going to help her mother with the washing and do the week's baking and enjoy herself thoroughly. Mary felt lonelier than ever when she knew she was no longer in the house. She went out into the garden as quickly as possible, and the first thing she did was to run round and round Fountain Flower Garden 10 times. She counted the times carefully. When she had finished, she felt in better spirits. The sunshine made the whole place look different. The high, deep blue sky arched over Misselthwaite as well as over the moor, and she kept lifting her face and looking up into it, trying to imagine what it would be like to lie down in one of the little snow-white clouds that float about. She went into the first kitchen garden and found Ben Weatherstaff working there with 2 other gardeners. The change in the weather seemed to have done him good. He spoke to her of his own accord. "Springtime's a-comin'," he said. "Canna thou smell it?" Mary sniffled and thought she could. "I smell something nice and fresh and damp," she said. "That's the good rich earth," he answered, digging away. "It's in good humour making ready to grow things. It's glad when plantin' time comes. It's dull in the winter when it's got nought to do. In the flower gardens out there things'll be stirrin' down below in the dark. The sun's warmin' them. You'll see bits as green spikes stitching out o' the black earth after a bit." "What will they be?" asked Mary. "Crocuses and snowdrops and daffodillies. Has thou down ever seen them?" "No. Everything is hot and wet and green after the rains in India," said Mary, "and I think things grow up in a night." "These won't grow up in a night," said Weatherstaff. "Thou'll have to wait for 'em. They'll poke up a bit higher here, and push out a spike more there, and uncurl a leaf this day and another that. You'll watch 'em." "I'm going to," answered Mary. Very soon she heard the soft, rustling light of wings again, and she knew at once that the robin had come again. He was very pert and lively, and hopped about so close to her feet and put his head on one side and looked at her so slyly that she asked Ben Weatherstaff a question. "Do you think he remembers me?" she said. "Remembers thee?" said Weatherstaff indignantly. "He knows every cabbage stump in the gardens, let alone the people. He's never seen a little wench here before, and he's bent on finding out all about thee. There's no need to try to hide anything from him." "Are things stirring down below in the dark in that garden where he lives?" Mary inquired. "What garden?" grunted Weatherstaff, becoming surly again. "The one where the all rose trees are," she could not help asking, because she wanted so much to know. "Are all the flowers dead, or do some of them come again in the summer? Are there any roses?" "Ask him," said Ben Weatherstaff, hunching his shoulders toward the robin. "He's the only one that knows. No one else has seen inside it for 10 years. 10 years was a long time, Mary thought. She had been born 10 years ago. She walked away slowly, thinking. She had begun to like the gardens just as she begun to like the robin and Dickon and Martha's mother. She was beginning to like Martha too. That seemed a good many people to like, when you were not used to liking. She thought of the robin as one of the people. She went to her walk outside the long ivy-covered wall over which she could see the tree-tops, and the second time she walked up and down the most interesting and exciting thing happened to her, and it was all through Ben Weatherstaff's robin. She heard a chirp in a twitter, and when she looked at the bare flower bed at her left side there was a hopping about and pretending to pick things out of the earth to persuade her that he had not followed her, but she knew he had followed her, and the surprise so filled her with delight that she almost trembled a little. "You do remember me," she cried. "You do. You're prettier than anything else in the world." She chirped and talked and coaxed, and he hopped, and flirted his tail and twittered. It was as if he were talking. His red waistcoat was like satin, and he puffed his tiny breast out and was so fine and grand and so pretty that it was really as if he were showing her how important and like human person a robin could be. Mistress Mary forgot she had been contrary in her life, and he allowed her to draw closer and closer to him, and bend down and talk, and try to make something like robin sounds. Oh, to think that he should actually let her come as near to him as that! He knew nothing in the world would make her put out her hand toward him, or startle him in the least tiniest way. He knew it because he was a real person, only nicer than other person in the world. She was so happy that she scarcely dared to breathe. The flower bed was not quite bare. It was bare of flowers because the perennial plants had been cut down for their winter rest, but there were tall shrubs and low ones which grew together as the back of the bed, and as the robin hopped about under them, she saw him hop over a small pile of freshly turned up earth. He stopped on it to look for a worm. The earth had been turned up because a dog had been trying to dig up a mole and he had scratched quite a deep hole. Mary looked at it not really knowing why the hole was there, and as she looked she saw something almost buried in the newly turned soil. It was something like the ring of a rusty iron or brass, and when the robin flew up into a tree nearby, she put out her hand and picked the ring up. It was more than a ring, however. It was the old key which looked as if it had been buried a long time. Mistress Mary stood up and looked at it with almost frightened face as it had hung from her finger. Perhaps it had been buried for 10 years, she said in a whisper. Perhaps it is the key to the garden. Chapter 8. The Robin Who Showed Me the Way. She looked at the key quite a long time. She turned it over and thought about it. As I have said before, she was not a child who had been trained to ask permission or consult her elders about things. All she thought about the key was that if it was the key to the closed garden, and she could find out where the door was, and could perhaps open it and see what was inside the walls and what had happened to the old rose trees. It was because it had been shut up so long that she wanted to see it. It seemed as if it must be different from other places, and that something strange must have happened to it during 10 years. Besides that, if she liked it, she could go into it every day and shut the door behind her, and she could make up some play of her own and play in quite alone, because nobody would ever know where she was, but would think that the door was still locked and the key buried in the earth. The thought of that pleased her very much. Living, as it were, all by herself in a house with 100 mysteriously closed rooms, and having nothing whatever to amuse herself, had set her inactive brain to working and was actually awaking her imagination. There was no doubt that the fresh, strong, pure air from the moor had a great deal to do with it, just as it had given her an appetite, and fighting with the wind had startled her blood, so that she so the same things had stirred her mind. In India she had always been too hot and languid and weak to care much about anything, but in this place she was beginning to care and want to do new things. Already she felt less contrary, though she did not know why. She put the key in her pocket and walked up and down her walk. No one but herself ever seemed to come here, so she could walk slowly and look at the wall, or rather at the ivy growing on it. The ivy was the baffling thing. Howsoever carefully she looked, she could see nothing but thickly growing glossy green leaves. She was very much disappointed. Something of her carrot dreams came back to her as she paced Something of her contrariness came back to her as she paced the walk and looked over it at the tree tops inside. It seemed so silly, she said to herself, to be near it and not to be able to get in. She took the key in her pocket and she went back to the house, and she made up her mind that she would always carry it with her when she went out, so that if she ever should find the hidden door, she would be ready. Mrs. Medlock had allowed Martha to sleep all night at the cottage, but she was back at her work in the morning with cheeks redder than ever and in the best of spirits. I got up at 4 o'clock, she said. It was pretty on the moor, with the birds getting up and the rabbits scampering about and the sun rising. I didn't walk all the way. A man gave me a ride in his cart, and I did enjoy myself. She was full of stories of the delights of her day out. Her mother had been glad to see her, and they had got the baking and washing all out of the way. She had even made each of the children a dough cake with a bit of brown sugar in it. I had 'em all piping hot when they came in from playing on the moor, and the cottage all smelt o' nice, clean hot bacon, and there was good fire, and they just shouted for joy. Our Dickon, he said our cottage was good enough for a king. In the evening they had all sat round the fire, and Martha and her mother had sewed patches on torn clothes and mended stockings, and Martha had told them about the little girl who had come from India, who had been waited on all her life by what Martha called blacks until she didn't know how to put on her own stockings. "Aye, they did like to hear about you," said Martha. "They wanted to know all about the blacks and about the ship you came in. I couldn't tell 'em enough." Mary reflected a little. "I'd tell you a great deal more before your next day out," she said, "so that you will have more to talk about. I dare say they would like to hear about riding on elephants and camels, and about the officers going to hunt tigers." "My word!" cried delighted Martha. "It would set 'em clean off their heads. Would tha really do that, miss? It would be same as wild beast show like we heard they had in York once." "India is quite different from Yorkshire," Mary said slowly, as she thought the matter over. "I never thought of that. The Dickon and your mother like to hear you talk about me." "Why, our Dickon's eyes nearly started out of his head, they got that round," answered Martha. "But mother, she was put out about your seeming to be all by yourself like. She said, 'Hasn't Mr. Craven got no governess for her, nor no nurse?' And I said, 'No, he hasn't, though Mrs. Medlock says he will when he thinks of it. But she says he might think of it or 2 or 3 years.'" "I don't want a governess," said Mary sharply. "But mother said you ought to be learning your book by this time, and you ought to have a woman to look after you. And she says, now, Martha, you just think how you'd feel yourself in a big place like that, wandering all alone and no mother. You do your best to cheer her up," she says, and I said I would. Mary gave her a long, steady look. "You do cheer me up," she said. "I like to hear you talk." Presently Martha went out of the room and came back with something held in her hand under her apron. "What dost thou think?" she said, with a cheerful grin. "I've brought thee a present." "A present!" exclaimed Mistress Mary. "How could a cottage full of 14 hungry people give any one a present?" "A man was driving across the moor peddling," Martha explained, "and he stopped his cart at our door. He had pots and pans and odds and ends, but mother had no money to buy anything. Just as he was going away, our Elizabeth Ellen called out, 'Mother, he's got skipping ropes with red and blue handles.' And mother, she calls out quite sudden, 'Here, stop, mister! How much are they?' And he says, 'Tuppence.' And mother, she began fumbling in her pocket, and she says to me, 'Martha, thou's brought me thy wages like a good lass, and I've got 4 places to put every penny, but I'm just going to take tuppence out of it to buy that child's skipping rope.' And she bought one, and here it is." She brought it out from under her apron and exhibited it quite proudly. It was a strong, slender rope, with a striped red and blue handle at each end. But Mary Lennox had never seen a skipping rope before. She gazed at it with a mystified expression. "What's it for?" she asked curiously. "For!" cried out Martha. "Does that mean they've got not got skipping ropes in India? For all they've got elephants and tigers and camels. No wonder most of 'em's black. This is what it's for. Just watch me." And she ran into the middle of the room and taking a handle in each hand began to skip and skip and skip, while Mary turned in her chair to stare at her. The faces in the old portraits seemed to stare at her too, and wonder what on earth this common little cottager had impudence to be doing under their very noses. But Martha did not even see them. The interest and curiosity in Miss Mary's face delighted her, and she went on skipping and counted as she skipped until she had reached 100. "I could skip longer than that," she said when she stopped. "I've skipped as much as 500 when I was 12, but I wasn't as fat then and as I as I am now, and I was in practice." Mary got up from her chair, beginning to feel excited herself. "It looks nice," she said. "Your mother is a kind woman. Do you think I could ever skip like that?" "You just try it," urged Martha, handing her the skipping rope. "You can't skip 100 at first, but if you practice, you'll mount up. That's what Mother said. She says nothing will do her more good than skipping rope. It's the sensiblest toy a child can have. Let her play out in the fresh air skipping, and it'll stretch her legs and arms and give her strength in." It was plain that there was not a great deal of strength in Mistress Mary's arms and legs when she first began to skip. She was not very clever at it, but she liked it so much that she did not want to stop. "Put on the things and they'll run and skip outdoors," said Martha. "Mother said I must tell you to keep outdoors as much as you could, even when it rains a bit, so as they'll wrap up warm." Mary put on her coat and hat and took her skipping rope over her arm. She opened the door to go out and then suddenly thought of something and turned back rather slowly. "Martha," she said, "they were your wages. It was your 2 pence really." "Thank you," she said it stiffly because she was not used to thanking people or noticing that they did things for her. "Thank you," she said, and held out her hand because she did not know what else to do. Martha gave her hand a clumsy little shake, as if she was not accustomed to this sort of thing either. Then she laughed. "I thought a queer, old womanish thing," she said. "If that been thou Elizabeth Ellen, that'd have given me a kiss." Mary looked even stiffer than ever. "Do you want me to kiss you?" Martha laughed again. "Nay, not me," she answered. "If thou was different, perhaps that one to thyself, but that isn't. Run off outside and play with thy rope." Mistress Mary felt a little awkward as she went out of the room. Yorkshire's people seemed strange, and Martha was always rather puzzled to her. At first she had disliked disliked her very much, but now she did not. The skipping rope was a wonderful thing. She counted and skipped and skipped and counted until her cheeks were quite red and she was more interested than she had ever been since she was born. The sun was shining and a little wind was blowing, not a rough wind, but one which came in delightful little gusts and brought a fresh scent of newly turned earth with it. I'm so sorry, I just have to tell the story first. So, in high school, we read this prescribed book called The Pro. It was about a boy in high school. He refused to write his name in his textbooks. He wrote, in the first year, he wrote the amateur, and the next year, he wrote the novice or something like that. And in his final year of school, he wrote the pro. That's why the book was named that. Anyway, so we took turns in class reading from this prescribed book, and this boy, the main character, had a best friend, and they went poaching abalone, and his friend pretended that the police would have caught them, and he has them under a bush, and he goes, "Oh, dog shit." And I had to read that in class, and I couldn't stop laughing, not because I had to curse in front of my classmates or the teacher. It's because I thought specifying it as dog shit gave context to a very ambiguous I mean, not even an ambiguous situation. I mean, it's trouble. It's not, but in this book, it was like, oh, it's not just trouble. It's not just, oh shit, oh dog shit. I thought that was cursing very specifically, and I couldn't stop laughing either. I'm so sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, the teacher didn't let me read again. The skipper was a wonderful thing. She counted and skipped and counted and skipped until her cheeks were quite red, and she was more interested than she had ever been since she was born. The sun was shining and a little wind was blowing, not a rough wind, but one which came in delightful little gusts and brought a fresh scent of newly turned earth with it. She skipped round the fountain garden and up one walk and down another. She skipped at last into the kitchen garden and saw Ben Weatherstaff digging and talking to his robin, which was hopping about him. She skipped down the walk toward him, and she lifted his head and looked at her with a curious expression. She had wondered if he would notice her. She wanted him to see her skip. "Well," he exclaimed, "upon my word, perhaps thou'rt a young un after all, and perhaps thou'st got child's blood in thy veins instead of sour buttermilk. Thy skip red into thy cheeks as sure as my name's Ben Weatherstaff. I wouldn't have believed thou could do it." "I never skipped before," Mary said. "I'm just beginning, and can only go up to 20. "Thou keep on," said Ben. "Thou shapes well enough at it for a young un. Thou's lived with heathen. Just see how he's watching thee." Jerking his head toward the robin, he followed after the yesterday. He followed after the yesterday. He'll be here at it again today. He'll be bound to find out what the skipping rope is. He's never seen one, eh? Shaking his head at the bird. Thus curiosity will be the death of thee some time, if that doesn't look sharp. Mary skipped round all the gardens and round the orchard, resting every few minutes. At length she went to her own special walk and made up her mind to try as if she could skip the whole length of it. It was a good long skip, and she began slowly, but before she had gone halfway down the path, she was so hot and breathless that she was obliged to stop. She did not mind much, because she had already counted up to 30. She stopped with a little laugh of pleasure, and there, lo and behold, was the robin swaying on a long branch of ivy. He had followed her, and he greeted her with a chirp. As Mary had skipped toward him, she felt something heavy in her pocket strike against her at each jump, and when she saw the robin she laughed again. "You showed me where the key was yesterday," she said. "You ought to show me the door today. But I don't believe you know." The robin flew from his swinging spray of ivory on the top of the wall, and he opened his beak and sang a loud lovely trill merely to show off. Nothing in the world is quite as adorably lovely as a robin when he shows off, and they are nearly always doing it. Mary Lennox had heard a great deal about magic in her Aya stories, and she always said that what happened almost at that moment was magic. One of the nice little gusts of wind rushed down the walk, and it was a stronger one than the rest. It was strong enough to wave the branches of the trees, and it was more than strong enough to sway the trailing sprays of untrimmed ivy hanging from the wall. Mary had stepped close to the robin, and suddenly the gust of wind swung aside some loose ivy trails, and more suddenly still she jumped toward it and caught it in her hand. This she did because she had seen something under it, a round knob, which had been covered by the leaves hanging over it. It was the knob of a door. She put her hands under the leaves and began to pull and push them aside. Thick as the ivy hung, it nearly all was a loose and swinging curtain, though some had crept over wood and iron. Mary's heart began to thump and her hands to shake a little in her delight and excitement. The robin kept singing and twittering away and tilting his head on one side, as if he were as excited as she was. What was under her hands was square and made of iron, which had round fingers found a hole in. What was this under her hands, which was square and made of iron, and which her fingers found a hole in? It was the lock of the door, which had been closed 10 years, and she put her hand in her pocket, drew out the key, and found it fitted the keyhole. She put the key in and turned it. It took 2 hands to do it, but it did turn. And then she took a long breath and looked behind her up the long walk to see if anyone was coming. No one was coming. No one ever did come, it seemed. She took another long breath, because she could not help it, and held back the swinging curtain of ivy and pushed back the door, which opened slowly, slowly. Then she slipped through it and shut it behind her and stood with her against it and stood with her back against it, looking about her and breathing quite fast with excitement and wonder and delight. She was standing inside the secret garden. Chapter 9. The Strangest House Anyone Ever Lived In. It was the sweetest, most mysterious looking place anyone could imagine. The high walls which shut it in were covered with the leafless stems of climbing roses, which were so thick that they were matted together. Mary Lennox knew they were roses because she had seen great many roses in India. All the ground was covered with grass of a wintry brown, and out of it grew clumps of bushes, which were surely rose bushes if they were alive. There were numbers of standard roses which had spread their branches that they were like little trees. There were other trees in the garden. There were other trees in the garden, and one of the things which made the place look strangest and loveliest was the climbing roses had run all over them and swung down long tendrils which made light swaying curtains, and here and there they had caught at each other or at far-reaching branch, and had crept from one and had crept from one tree to another and made lovely bridges of themselves. There were neither leaves nor roses on them now, and Mary did not know whether they were dead or alive, but their thin grey or brown branches had sprays, looked like sort of hazy mantle spreading over everything, walls and trees, and even brown grass, where they had fallen from their fastings and run along the ground. It was this hazy tangle from tree to tree which made it all look so mysterious. Mary had thought it must be different from other gardens which had not been left all by themselves so long, and indeed it was different from any other place she had ever seen in her life. "How still it is," she whispered. "How still!" Then she waited a moment and listened at the stillness. The robin who had flown to his tree-top was still as all the rest. He did not even flutter his wings. He sat without stirring and looked at Mary. "No wonder it is still," she whispered again. "I am the first person who has spoken in here for 10 years." She moved away from the door, stepping as softly as she were afraid of awakening someone. She was glad that there was grass under her feet, and that her steps made no sound. She walked under one of the fairy-like grey arches between the trees and looked up at the sprays and tendrils which formed them. "I wonder if they are all quite dead," she said. "Is it all quite dead, garden? I wish it wasn't." If she had been Ben Weatherstaff, she could have told whether the wood was alive by looking at it, but she could only see that there were only grey or brown sprays and branches, and none showed any signs of even a tiny leaf bud anywhere. But as she was inside the wonderful garden, and she could come through, she through the door under the ivy any time she felt as if she had found a world all her own. The sun was shining inside the four walls, and the high arch of blue sky over this particular piece of Misselthwaite seemed even more brilliant and soft than it was over the moor. The robin flew down from his tree top and hopped about and flew after her from one bush to another. He chirped a good deal and had very busy air, as if he were showing her things. Everything was strange and silent, and she seemed to be hundreds of miles away from anyone, but somehow she did not feel lonely at all. All that troubled her was her wish that she knew whether all the roses were dead, or if perhaps some of them had lived and might put out leaves and buds as the weather got warmer. She did not want it to be a quite dead garden. If it were a quite live garden, how wonderful it would be, and what thousands of roses would grow on every side! Her skipping rope had hung over her arm, and she came in, and after she had walked about for a while, she thought she would skip round the whole garden, stopping when she wanted to look at things. There seemed to have been grass paths here and there, and in one or two corners there were alcoves of evergreen with stone seats or tall moss-covered flower urns in them. As she came near the second of these alcoves she stopped skipping. There had once been a flower bed in it, and she thought she saw something sticking out of the black earth, some sharp little pale green points. She remembered what Ben Weatherstaff had said, and she knelt down to look at them. Yes, there are tiny growing things. There might be crocuses or snowdrops or daffodils, she whispered. She bent very close to them and sniffed the fresh scent of the damp earth. She liked it very much. Perhaps there are some other ones coming up in other places, she said. I will go all over the garden and look. She did not skip but walked. She went slowly and kept her eyes on the ground. She looked in the old border beds and among the grass, and after she had gone round trying to miss nothing, she had found ever so many more sharp pale green points, and she had become quite excited again. It wasn't quite dead garden, she cried out softly to herself. Even if the roses are dead, there are other things alive. She did not know anything about gardening, but the grass seemed so thick in some of the places where the green points were pushing their way through that she thought they did not seem to have room enough to grow. She searched about until she found a rather sharp piece of wood and knelt down and dug and weeded out the weeds and grass until she made nice little clearing places around them. Now they look as if they could breathe, she said after she had finished with the first ones. I'm going to do ever so many more. I'll do all I can see. If I haven't time today, I can come tomorrow. She went from place to place and dug and weeded and enjoyed herself so immensely that she was led on from bed to bed and into the grass under the trees. The exercise made her so warm that she first threw her coat off and then her hat, and without knowing it she was smiling down onto the grass and the pale green points all the time. The robin was tremendously busy. He was very much pleased to see gardening begun in his own estate. He had often wondered at Ben Weatherstaff, where gardening is done. All sorts of delightful things to eat are turned up with the soil. Now here was this new kind of creature who was not half Ben's size, and yet had had the sense to come into his garden and begin at once. Mistress Mary worked in her garden until it was time to go to her midday dinner. In fact, she was rather late in remembering, and when she put on her coat and hat and picked up her skipping rope, she could not believe that she had been working 2 or 3 hours. She had been actually happy all the time, and dozens of tiny pale green points were to be seen in clear places, looking twice as cheerful as they had looked before, when the grass and weeds had been smothering them. "I shall come back this afternoon," she said, looking all around her new kingdom and speaking to the trees and the rose bushes as if they had heard her. Then she ran lightly across the grass, pushed opened the slow old door, and slipped through it under the ivy. She had such red cheeks and such bright eyes and ate such a dinner that Martha was delighted. "2 pieces of meat and 2 helps o' rice pudding," she said. "Ay, mother will be pleased when I tell her what the skip rope's done for thee." In the course of her digging with her pointed stick, Mistress Mary had found herself digging up a sort of white root, rather like an onion. She had put it back in its place and patted the earth carefully down on it, and just now she wondered if Martha could tell her what it was. "Martha," she said, "what are those white roots that look like onions?" "They're bulbs," answered Martha. "Lots of spring flowers grow from 'em. The very the very little ones are snowdrops and crocuses, and the big ones are narcissus and jonquils and daffodillies. The biggest of all is lilies and purple flags. Aye, they're nice. Dickon's got a whole lot of 'em planted in our garden." "Does Dickon know all about them?" asked Mary, a new idea taking possession of her. "Our Dickon can make a flower grow out of a brick wall. Mother says he just whispers things out of the ground." "Do bulbs live a long time? Would they live years and years if no one helped them?" inquired Mary anxiously. "They're things as helps themselves," said Martha. "That's why poor folk can afford to have 'em. If you don't trouble 'em, most of 'em will work away underground for a lifetime and spread out and have little uns. There's a place in the woods here where there's snowdrops by thousands. They're the prettiest sight in Yorkshire when the spring comes. No one knows when they was first planted." "I wish the spring was here now," said Mary. "I want to see all things that grow in England." She had finished her dinner and gone to favourite seat on the hearthrug. I wish I had a little spade," she said. "Whatever does thou want a spade for?" asked Martha, laughing. "Art thou going to take to diggin'? I must tell mother that too." Mary looked at the fire, pondered a little. She must be careful if she meant to keep her secret kingdom. She wasn't going to do any harm, but if Mr. Crane found out about the open door, he would be fearfully angry and get a new key and lock it up forevermore. She really could not bear that. "This is such a big lonely place," she said slowly, as if she were turning matters over in her mind. "The house is lonely, and the park is lonely, and the gardens are lonely. So many places seem shut up. I never did many things in India, but there were more people to look at, natives and soldiers marching by, and sometimes bands playing, and my aunt told me stories. There was no one to talk to here except you and Ben Weatherstaff. And you have to do your work, and Ben Weatherstaff won't speak to me often. I thought if I had a little spade, I could dig somewhere as he does, and I might make a little garden if he would give me some seeds. Martha's face quite lighted up. Okay, I'm going to stop there for us tonight. Thank you for sitting with me and being patient with me. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I know it's going to be okay. And if it isn't, at least you're not alone anymore. And for that, I'm proud of you. If you need me again, I'll be back soon. Until then, I hope you take good care of your heart and your mind. Good night.